Pulavinaka, and welcome to For the Record. Tonight we'll be talking to representatives from the Ministry of Labour about bogus recruitment agencies or unregistered recruitment agencies which are approaching Fijians and promising them jobs overseas. This is a whole quagmire of issues, and a number of stories have come forward about how people have been duped or tricked and have fallen victim to these dubious operators. We'll talk more about that as the show progresses. Tonight in studio with us we have the Deputy Secretary for Labour, Mr. Viliame Balindrakandroka, and the Director Labour Compliance from the Ministry of Labour, Mr. Atish Kumar. Gentlemen, thank you very much for being on the show with us tonight. We also have with us our panelist, Joshua Tuere from the Fiji Sun, who will be conducting the show with us tonight. Getting right into it, first of all, with regards to these recruitment agencies that exist, what a lot of people would want to know is how many of them are registered, how many of them are legitimate businesses, and how many of them are actually bogus operators trying to fool people. Really, I'll start off with you.
Thank you, Eswini, and yes, welcome the viewers. Yes, actually, the ministry does authorize employment agencies, and to date we only have two authorized employment agencies, meaning that apart from the two, all others are actually unauthorized, so they're operating illegally, simply.
What happens then when they start operating and they start recruiting locals? Is that a risk? Obviously, it is a risk, but what
Yes.
sort of risks are we talking about?
Yeah, there's really huge risk involved as well. For example, when you look at labor mobility in general, I mean globally, there's a big risk involved because we have issues such as human trafficking involved, right? And this is another dimension of the whole labor mobility movement, right? And there's a big risk really involved in there. We've had cases in the past where our people got stranded overseas, taken away. I mean, taken through such bogus agencies, and then they left out there in the cold. Okay, so the sad thing is the ministry has to go back and try and get them back. So yes, when you talk about the risks, there's really huge risk involved with our people going into new places, totally new environment altogether, and exposed into such environments where they are completely cut off from home, and it can really be very risky and even life-threatening. So that's why the ministry is really concerned on such operators that operate outside of the law.
One of the most recent examples is the plight of the Fijian girl who was stranded in Kuwait, I think, working as a security guard.
Yes.
Explain how situations like this arise and how they sort of bypass the checks and balances that you put in place.
Yeah, it's really unfortunate because despite the law being in place, I mean the employment law that regulates the whole foreign employment engagements or recruitment in this case, we still have people that still go outside. Of course, because of the the opportunities available through IT where people can access directly, through the internet, people are accessing directly. But then again, we still have these agencies that still operate outside. So when that happens, and we not knowing, then this is where problems such as this arise. Because under the law, before a worker leaves our shore for foreign engagement, they must have their contracts vetted or tested by the Ministry of Labour. That's as per the Employment Relations Promulgation. So when it happens outside of that, then that's really where the dilemma is. So we not knowing that these workers have left, and the protection from our end is really very minimal in that side, because it's an arrangement outside of the formal arrangement. Okay? So that particular instance happening, I mean, I know it's not the first time, because we've had situations in the past that where our people got stranded out there in Kuwait, for example. So yeah, it's that's why we are always appealing to the public, you know, when situations arises, please come and visit the Ministry of Labour, right? The Ministry of Employment, rather. It's not the Ministry of Employment, right? Come and visit, because we have under our reforms, under the new legislation that we now in place, our people are well protected, right, before they go. While we encourage people to go, we have the regulations in place to really protect them very well while they are on engagements overseas.
So have Fijian security guards working in places like Afghanistan and Iraq followed the right processes?
That's a good question. Given that we only have two registered employment agencies, and with these two, they are not recruiting workers for security services overseas. So a lot of those, unfortunately, are going beyond or outside of the employment law. So they are certainly putting themselves into huge risks, right, where they are operating outside of the Ministry of Employment.
These recruitments were done on a very large scale. There was a lot of public discussion about it, and a lot of people knew that these companies were operating.
Yeah.
We now find out that they weren't registered, and yet people were still turning up.
Yes.
Was the ministry at any time able to step in and say, look, you're not registered, you don't have authority to do this, and you're putting locals at risk?
Yeah. Yeah, certainly. A common one that's known nationally is the case on Lolohair, right? We have proactively within the ministry went in and prosecute the particular guy, and it's now with the High Court.
Only sentenced.
Yeah, it's already sentenced in the High Court now, right? And likewise for another recruitment agency that was sending people again to Kuwait. So they have been sentenced as well. So from the ministry, as we are really taking it seriously, and under the law, anyone operating illegally for example, in that particular in those two particular cases, we've taken them on and taken them right to court.
All right. On that note, we'll have to take a quick break. We'll be right back. Welcome back to For the Record. We're talking about bogus recruitment agencies and the risks to Fijians. Atish, we've had some discussion about how these companies are able to operate and the risks involved. But when we're talking about registering a recruitment agency, what are some of the requirements that the ministry looks at?
Yes, thank you, Edwin. I think very important is the requirements that is covered within the employment agency regulations that came into effect on 2nd of April 2008. Now the regulation is very clear in terms of anybody who wants to register an employment agency and recruit the Fijian workers and send them overseas. They must follow a process stipulated within the law, and that says that the applicant must be over 21 years of age. They must not be an undischarged bankrupt, must have a clean police record, and must also provide in terms of the criteria in which they will be using to select the workers and take them overseas. Now they also must show cause in terms of which country they will be taking and what are the agreements which they have with the companies there. With that, they are required to pay a authorization fee of $1,000 and a surety bond of $20,000. Once this is paid and the applicant advised that in the daily newspaper and also in the government gazette, then the ministry does its due diligence in terms of investigating this applicant. And once the investigation is completed, and of course, this is submitted then to the Permanent Secretary for authorization. Then Permanent Secretary has a sole discretion in terms of the authorization. If there is additional information needed, then we go back to the applicant in terms of providing additional information. So once they are authorized, only then they are allowed to advertise and recruit people for foreign employment service. They also need to maintain a very clear database in terms of the number of applicants they have, their names, their age, and how much they are paying for their service. So all the payment for their services are actually authorized by the Permanent Secretary. When that is done, only then they can start charging money to these the applicant, the potential people who are willing to go overseas. Now, very important is when they are sent overseas, there is a process in terms of orientation. The agency must ensure that the medical checks are done, and there is also a criteria in place that pre-departure orientation is very important, knowing about the country in which they are going into work, and then attestation of foreign employment contract. Now, the foreign employment contract will be attested through by a labor officer with the Ministry of Employment, and once that is attested, then that particular applicant with, of course, the agency, then they are allowed to go and work for that particular period. Now, what is important here is that we need to ensure that our workers who are going overseas, the government must have the knowledge in terms of who are going overseas through these agencies. What we have seen is that previously people have just gone, and when there's some problem there, then of course state comes in to help them. The case of some of the fishermen which were extended, I think, in early 2003 in Bangladesh. Now, government had to spend money in bringing these people back. Now, if there were some proper procedures followed by the agencies, then this would not have happened. So what we are trying to ensure that they are allowed to recruit. Those who are registered are allowed to recruit, but they must ensure that these procedures are followed.
How many of these agencies are you monitoring who aren't registered and they're operating?
Currently, we are monitoring about 4 agencies, and we have formed a task force team in this, of course, with the assistance of the Fiji Police Force, with the assistance of the Commerce Commission, and we must thank the Commerce Commission CEO for that. We are investigating 4 of these agencies in terms of they are advertising and recruiting people, and we will be laying charges very soon on those agencies after the investigation.
Can you say what scale of recruitment they've done already? Because
yes,
we hit a peak some years ago where locals were being employed to work as security guards, and private security firms were coming in large numbers. They were working with companies which purportedly were recruitment agencies. Whether or not they were registered or not, we don't know. But there was a large scale of recruitment done, and there are people already overseas. So what's the scale of recruitment that these unregistered companies are doing?
Yes, I think with the National Employment Center coming into effect from the NEC Decree 2009, of course, the establishment of the Foreign Employment Service, what we have noted is that the number of people, of course, a large number of people are now registering through the Foreign Employment Service. What we have seen is these companies which are actually advertising to recruit foreign workers is not that big, because majority of the people are now coming to us in terms of the registration. But there are some who are actually going on to these companies. Some of them, of course, are going on to travel agents and paying money, and of course they are told and advised that they will get employment. There's also situations where there's lucrative package being given to them, saying that you will get your family migration together if somebody is employed in the other country. So these are some of the things that these agencies are actually using to attract people. What we are doing is we have in fact advised the enforcement agencies, of course the Fiji Police Force, Commerce Commission is also coming in, of course the Ministry of Employment, and we are going out. We have created awareness to these to the workers, to the employers, and we are ensuring that when the registration takes place, they must be registered through the authorized employment agencies. And of course with these 4 that are currently in the investigation, I think we hope that those workers who have actually paid out, we have advised them, they'll be coming in and they'll be cooperating with us in terms of the investigation.
Can you actually stop a worker from going to a destination country if you're not convinced that compliance at the other end, in the other country, is not rigorous enough? For example, you're not sure the contracts, they've actually gone through the whole process in the ministry, but you're not convinced that the destination country has rigorous compliance to be able to enforce contracts.
Yes, of course. The Foreign Employment Service of the Ministry of Employment actually does the check and balance due diligence in terms of where the workers will be going in. So only when there is a process followed, and we know that these workers who are going in, of course, they are process followed within those countries, then only we can attest the foreign contract. We do not send workers willy-nilly or just send workers like that, because they must ensure that they are covered within the laws of this country.
Really, for these companies which are being investigated and will most likely be charged, what happens to the people who have already lodged applications for recruitment, or people who have been sent across by these agencies who are now facing charges? What happens to their clients?
Yeah, that's a real issue, Edwin, rather, because what we are faced with at the moment is, well, after the when these agencies are charged and decisions are given, and we are working inside on how we can actually get a return from them, so that we can at least cover for instances where people are stranded overseas, and trying to take them into the charges, so that at least they can be looked after when such situations arise. That's why in the bonding arrangements that we have with the employment agencies, government's policy has changed from a paper bond to a monetary bond that we require from recruitment agencies, the $20,000. So that money is deposited in the ministry, and to be used when such situations arises. But outside of that, when those situations arises, that's the option that we are considering at the moment, to see that when such agencies are charged, we must recover from them too what the workers have paid. So that's how we're looking at it at this point in time. Be able to cover for these workers. I know some workers have gone overseas. It's good. I mean, they've gone overseas, but unfortunately, they've gone beyond the legal requirements, and which simply means that they are not protected while they are out there.
All right, it's time for another break. We'll be right back. Welcome back to For the Record. We're talking with representatives from the Ministry of Employment about bogus recruitment agencies in Fiji. Joshua, I'll give you the first question.
More than a few Fijians have received a visit at their homes from someone posing as a recruitment agency. What questions need to be asked to anyone who turns up at these homes in order to verify whether they're a legitimate recruitment agent?
Thank you, Joshua. Yeah. Very important is that we have recently received complaints that the people are coming to their doorstep and saying that, look, I want to send you overseas for employment. Now, people must realize that anyone that is coming in and they are posing to be a recruitment agent, they must have an authorization from the Ministry of Employment.
So is that the ID or?
Yes, it's an authorization certificate which is carried out, which is given to these agencies, and people cannot go door to door and do recruitment. And they must have an office space. They must have a operating place from where they can do recruitment. They can advertise if they are authorized. They can advertise, but they will have an office space, a proper office space where they are then allowed to recruit. Now, if somebody is going out, we have noticed some cases where people are going out to the villages, to the communities, saying that we will send you to Australia or New Zealand or where. But then important thing is that the members of the public must ask their authorization certificate. If only they carry an authorization certificate, if the name is there, and of course they must advise in terms of where the office is. And only they must, if there is an office space, they must go and check the authorization certificate. Once the authorization certificate is there, and only then members of the public can engage into that particular recruitment agency. Now, people can always call us and recheck in terms of whether somebody is authorized or not authorized, or they can visit the nearest police station or police post, or they can just discuss with them. We have seen that a lot of times people pay money and then later on they come back and complain. We investigate those cases, of course, with police and with the Commerce Commission. We investigate those cases. But just a word of caution to the members of the public that they must ensure that somebody who's coming in and advising about employment agency, they must have a authorization certificate.
What are some of the attractive destinations which are being offered, or the lucrative jobs which are being offered?
Well, yeah, one is really security. It's topical at this point in time, given the happenings around the world now. So that's a hot one. And then we also have tourism. Tourism is another one. And but given our experiences with the agency so far, it's really the security work. People going for security work. We had nurses for a while, and then caregiving, and then it's kind of died out again.
Why do you think that happened? Is it just lack of compliance from the other side, or just what were the issues involved?
Well, I suppose is really, when you talk about security, for example, as a major opportunity out there, the arrangement is really, with those that are not registered with us, because they doing their own arrangement with overseas companies. The risk comes in on the conditions on which our people will be exposed. So where we're coming from is the minimum standards that, if they are not met, we talk about occupational health and safety. We talk about compensation, when something happens on the other side. So these are all the issues that our people will be exposed to when they don't come through the ministry, when the contracts are not attested. And that's why it's really a serious issue with us. So we are again appealing to the public, as on the earlier issue, the authorization period given by the ministry is normally annually. It's a 1-year authorization. So the public really needs to check on the authorization certificate and see that it's valid as well. They ask the people claiming to be recruitment agencies, where is your authorization certificate issued by the Ministry of Employment? Is it valid? Just like the driving license. Okay. So if they are not valid, suppose people come around carrying these certificates and they are not valid, then really the public shouldn't be swayed into such opportunities.
How much would some of these agents be charging? Basically going up to them saying, look, I can get you a $50,000 job or a $80,000 job if you pay me X amount of fees. How much are they charging?
I think we have noted, of course, from the complaint that we have received, some are paying about $100 to $200, some are paying about as much as $500 in terms of getting these employment contracts. But what we have seen is none of these have eventuated, and of course it's under investigation. And through the investigation team, we have noted that there, of course, now the job has been habituated. People have paid money, but the receipts have been provided, and many times the receipts are given without any name or any contact of anybody. It's just a plain receipt that is given, saying that you have paid so much, and of course you are applying for recruitment. But very important is that when members of the public, when they pay money, they must first ask about the authorization certificate. That we have been advising through the media, and of course we have been conducting awareness to the members of the public through both the print media and of course through the radio, in terms of ensuring that when they pay money, they first must get the value for their money, and in that they must go through the process.
All right, we will take another break. We'll be right back. Welcome back to For the Record. We're talking about bogus recruitment agencies and the risks to Fijians. Really, I'd like to find out, you mentioned that security is the latest trend at the moment. We already have a number of Fijians working in some very dangerous places as security officers. Have they been recruited through registered and licensed agents, and are they fully protected?
Well, we said earlier that we only have 2 registered agencies, so formal employment agencies, and they haven't sent any security workers, which basically means that those security officers that are out there outside of our normal military, or are certainly operating outside of the ambit of our employment laws. So unfortunately, they are going through illegal means. I mean, in getting that, illegal in the sense that they are not complying with the standards that we have in our employment laws.
So who gets to foot the bill if one of the security guards dies on duty abroad? Who brings the body across? Who pays for that? Who pays compensation? Who's responsible for that?
Well, this really the issue, Suai. That's why we're really keen on appealing again to the public, because when such situation arises and has happened, unfortunately, I mean, people come back to government, right? And because when we finally know in the ministry that is happening, and when we investigate, there is no one responsible, no one accountable, right? The recruiters have gone, and then because they are nationals, then it's again back to government. We've just had situations where the ministry or the government through the ministry have to pay for the repatriation of our workers back. So that's why we are appealing to the public, given the offers that are available, particularly for security work overseas. Please come through the ministry, right, or to the recruiters wanting to recruit our people for overseas employment. Please come through the ministry, get it formalized, and then we send our people, right? Because yes, of course, we want to send our people across because of the opportunities available. But please come through the provisions of the employment laws.
In these sort of situations where the ministry is not involved and you just don't know, yes, I suppose it would be very difficult to try and track down these people who've already gone overseas, yes, and who are not protected by the safety net of sorts that's provided, yes, if they go through a registered agency. Have you tried to reach out to these people? Have you tried to establish communication with them? And has it been successful?
Really, I mean, it's really unfortunate because in many situations, or I would say in all situations, we are in the dark. That people have gone, I mean, then they are overseas. The only time that we come to know is when a problem arises. When a problem arises, then people look to the ministry. How can we assist, in that situation? So that's really the dilemma at this point in time. And of course, given the constraints that we have in the organization, okay, given the financial limitations that we have in the Ministry of Labour, it's really very hard for us, to be going out proactively on that angle, meaning from the resource constraints that we have, to be able to really track down and see that these people are out there. So unless unless people come to the ministry, particularly on those foreign employments, then we will know.
Atish, do you suspect, would it be fair to say that a lot of locals would feel that they have a better chance of succeeding in their recruitment if they go to one of these unregistered agencies, or as opposed to going to the two that have been registered, because there are more stringent rules that apply if you go through a registered agent, and there is more due diligence and more background checks. If you go to an unregistered agent, you have a better chance of getting through.
No, I think even very important is those unregistered agents, they have got they don't have any employment market overseas. They're just trying to make money overnight. And of course, people who are going to these unregistered agents, we can safely say that they have got no chance at all in terms of going overseas, because they are paying money for a service which will not be given to them. Those who are registered with the Ministry of Employment, we do the due diligence for them. We ensure that they have got employment market overseas. And of course, very important is that they must follow the criteria in place. The unregistered ones are giving some lucrative package in terms of family migration, in terms of getting people through tourist visa, and when they go to the host country, and of course, then they turn into the work permit. So these are some of the things that they are using to lure people to them. But we are advising members of the public that these things don't work. And even if they go to a particular country, if they breach the visa provisions, of course they will be deported. And another way, what happens is that they are the ones who will be losing money. So with the unregistered agents, there is no chance at all in which they can be going overseas.
Joshua?
Have you got a few applications pending, or you're reviewing at the moment for companies who want to register?
Yeah, we have got few applications with us. We are currently investigating those companies in terms of provisions of their license, and we are also reviewing the criteria in place. So we are ensuring that we give the best for our people in terms of the recruitment. We want to ensure, from government side, very important is that we want our people to be protected in terms of whatever they are doing. If they're going overseas, there must be a valid employment contract. There must be provisions for the workmen's compensation. There must be the provisions for in terms of if there's some like workers who are injured, or in terms of workers who are actually paid for their wages and things. The contract must spell out everything, and then the best is, of course, that the worker must come back to his family or her family, because what we have seen is a lot of times when they go and there's no communication with the family. So very important is that we ensure that there's a communication link from the particular agent, from the worker, back to the family, and of course back to the Ministry of Employment.
All right, well, on that note, it's time for another break. When we come back, we'll be talking about a new initiative that's been introduced or been announced by Cabinet, a seasonal worker scheme for Fijians. We will have details after the break. Welcome back. Towards the end of the show now, we will be speaking about the recognized seasonal worker scheme to New Zealand. 30 Fijians as a pilot project will be chosen to work in New Zealand. Mr. Balandroka, the criteria that's been announced along with this worker scheme, you have to have experience in agriculture, you have to be registered with the National Employment Centre. Just some of the requirements. You have to preferably come from a rural setting.
Yes.
Of course, the overall theme, it seems, is that the government wants to be sure that the right people get selected.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, we are very grateful that because of the offer now in place, going back to the employment agencies, this is the whole reason why government established the National Employment Center, so that it can, from the center, it can even send our people across. And the RSE comes in at the very right time. So Cabinet, as you stated, endorsed the selection criteria. We have two sets of selection criteria. So we are serious about this opportunity. So we want to ensure that we send the right people to New Zealand. Right? We want to give the New Zealand farmers the good workers or best workers. That's the two selection criteria. So there's a generic one where workers have to go through the basic checks. talking about medical checks, police checks, and they must be rural based and must register with the NEC as the requirements of the law itself. And then after coming through the generic criteria, then they go through specific criteria, right? Because the work involved is not easy really, eh? Because though it's fruit picking, but it's very labor intensive. It involves long hours and continuous work. The contract is for 7 months, eh? So it's continuous work for that 7 months, eh? So it's not an on and off type of work, eh? But workers have to work continuously and on a daily basis, and may even extend to the weekends, right? Because when the employer wants his or her apple to be picked in this week, she is working on the schedule that the apples have to be put into the container and then shipped in the ship which is scheduled for that particular date, eh? So it's really involves a lot of strenuous work. So that's why we are strict on the criteria, so that we ensure that we pick the right people, right? People have to be fit physically as well as mentally, right? And with good character, of course, so that when we send people across, they really match the needs of the employers, eh? So with the strict selection criteria, it will really help us to get these workers into a work ready pool, and then with the other necessary preparations that we need to do, for example, pre-departure training, all that. But first we select them into this work ready pool and then prepare them before they leave. Eh?
There are probably viewers who are listening to your answer and wondering, how can I get into that queue? What's the first thing they need to do?
Okay. Well, as you know, now the pilot is we are sending 30 for the pilot, eh? And it's starting really in February. Okay, so from the 30, again as endorsed to the government, we will have a barrel selection. Okay, so we're hoping to have these pretty soon, where we'll select from the pool these workers. Eh? I know, of course, as the RSE is employer driven, meaning that it depends on the demand of the employer, the specifications of the employer. So that's why in the design of the selection criteria, we keep the work specification close to us at the same time, eh? So that the people that are channeled through the selection criteria also fit the work specifications by employers. And in the end, the scheme, the employer has the final say in terms of who they want to recruit. Eh? So in the work ready pool, once they come through the selection process, they're in the work ready pool, then we send this to the employers in New Zealand. And for the first 2 recruiters, we are grateful the employers themselves will come in and do the final interview and the selection of the workers before they depart. Eh? So yes, the criteria is stringent, the 2 selection criteria, and then we have the specification by employers that we have to meet at the same time, eh? Because of the nature of the work that workers will be doing while over there. Eh?
30 slots on a pilot basis.
Yes.
What's the total amount or the total number of workers we could be sending if this is successful?
Okay. Well, we are grateful indeed. I mean, to New Zealand, because they've just lifted the current cap, the cap that they used to have for Pacific Island workers. Eh? So it has now increased to 9,000. Was at 8,000, and with Fiji coming in, they've increased the cap now to by an additional 1,000. But But as I said, it's employer driven. So that's why we really want to ensure that we have a process in place to ensure that our workers are lucrative when they go to New Zealand. So we really want to ensure that the first 30, the pilot that we're sending, they are our best workers. So because if they do well that side, once they make the employers happy the other side, the opportunity is going to be available to many others.
You obviously want to make sure that Fiji has a bigger slice of the cake in New Zealand in terms of workers being sent there, but there are some obvious risks, and this is based on the experiences of other Pacific Island countries who have workers and they've had issues like overstaying and
Yes.
how do you manage those risks? What do you tell the
Thank
people, the workers, before they leave?
Thank you. Yes, that's a real issue on the ground in New Zealand. So with us to mitigate those risks, we have in the after they've gone through the strict selection criteria in the regulations for the National Employment Center on foreign employment, we will be discussing with the workers also the requirements of the regulations, which we will specify to them, with which we want to keep a portion of their savings within Fiji, right? Meaning that once they've gone to New Zealand and working there, a portion of their earnings every week have to be deposited into the National Employment Center, which they will receive when they return. So it's part of our risk management on, for example, on overstaying. So this is something that's gonna pull them back. We have some cases, learning from the other Pacific Island countries where they ban alcohol consumption. But it's applicable here, but may not be really applicable in New Zealand, right? Where it's going to be hard to enforce those. But we are also, what we do is we are looking at the experiences of the other Pacific Island countries and see which ones will better fit our situation. On, for example, on alcohol, Yangona, for example, right? Whether our workers to be consuming Yangona while they're in New Zealand. But looking through the two criteria, it's really very, it's quite tough. So the workers really have to prepare themselves very well, before even going.
You believe you have the right framework already?
Well, that's what we want to have in place to ensure that because we're looking at this that as a business case for us, right? So it's an opportunity that's available to us now, to Fijians. So we want to ensure that we do it right first time, so that we keep sending more people across.
All right, and with that, gentlemen, we've come to the end of our show tonight. Thank you very much for being with us. Of course, we look forward to having you back with us sometime in the future. Joshua, to you as well, thank you very much. And that was our show tonight. Remember, if you have comments or questions, you can email fortherecord@fpc.com.fj. I'll be back again next Sunday. Until then, good night.